My boss fired me in front of the entire company because he believed I had sabotaged a $1 million project, but 3 weeks later he discovered I owned the patent that made the entire product possible. Suddenly the man who had humiliated me was calling every day begging for a meeting. I had worked at the company for almost 7 years. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't political, and I wasn't interested in office drama. I just liked building things. 5 years earlier, while working on a side project at home, I invented a technology that dramatically improved battery efficiency. At the time I couldn't afford to commercialize it, so I licensed the patent to my employer in exchange for royalties. Only a handful of executives knew about the arrangement. Everyone else assumed I was just another engineer. For years everything went smoothly. Then the company hired a new vice president named Greg. Greg loved attention. He loved taking credit. Most importantly, he hated anyone who knew more than he did. At first he seemed friendly, but over time he started excluding experienced employees from major decisions. Whenever projects succeeded, he claimed responsibility. Whenever problems appeared, he looked for someone to blame. Unfortunately, that someone eventually became me. One morning a major product launch failed during a demonstration with investors. Systems crashed. Deadlines were missed. Millions of dollars were suddenly at risk. Within hours Greg announced he had identified the cause. Me. I was completely shocked. According to him, changes I had made months earlier were responsible for the failure. He presented charts, reports, and technical explanations that sounded convincing to executives who didn't understand the details. I tried explaining that the evidence made no sense. Nobody listened. Then things got worse. Greg called an emergency company-wide meeting. Hundreds of employees joined. In front of everyone, he announced that I had acted negligently and was being terminated immediately. I remember walking through the office carrying a cardboard box while people stared at me. It was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. At first I thought that was the worst part, but I had no idea what was coming. A few days later, one of my former coworkers contacted me privately. He told me something strange. Several engineers had reviewed the failure and couldn't understand Greg's explanation. The technical evidence didn't support his claims. Then I discovered something that made everything make sense. Greg hadn't misunderstood the data. He had hidden part of it. The real cause of the failure was a cost-cutting decision he personally approved months earlier. He had replaced critical components with cheaper alternatives despite repeated warnings. If the truth became public, his career would be finished. That's when I remembered something important. The entire product depended on my patent license. The agreement contained a clause allowing termination if I was dismissed for misconduct without supporting evidence. Greg didn't know that. Neither did most executives. 3 weeks after firing me, the legal department reviewed the situation. The next thing I found out completely changed everything. Their lawyers concluded that the company had violated the licensing agreement. As a result, they no longer had rights to use the patent. Production stopped immediately. Investor panic followed. Board members demanded answers. Internal investigations began. Suddenly the same executives who had ignored me wanted meetings. Then came the final twist. Investigators recovered deleted emails showing that Greg had known the real cause of the failure before firing me. He had intentionally blamed me to protect himself. Once those emails surfaced, his entire defense collapsed. Within 48 hours he was terminated. A week later the board offered me a settlement, a public apology, and a consulting contract worth more than my previous salary. I accepted the settlement but declined returning as an employee. Instead, I used the money and patent royalties to launch my own company. 2 years later, that company became one of the fastest-growing businesses in the industry. Ironically, several former coworkers eventually joined me. As for Greg, the last thing I heard was that he was struggling to find another executive position. Looking back now, getting fired felt like the end of my career, but it turned out to be the beginning of something much bigger. That experience taught me that people can steal credit, spread blame, and manipulate perceptions, but eventually the truth catches up to everyone.